Chapter 739. After a moment of silence, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly, "Brother Bai's methods are unquestionable, but I still have to advise you not to trespass into the netherworld. You must know that not everyone can ascend to the immortal realm, but most of them end up in the netherworld. In the endless darkness, there may be some unknown beings more terrifying than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor." Even Bai Changchun was moved by this. "Immortal Lord, do you mean that there are people in the netherworld with higher cultivation than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up as he listened. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. No one knows where the end of the netherworld is. On the surface, the immortal realm and the netherworld are equally famous, but that's all on the surface. Those unknown beings that have been silent for countless years are the most terrifying existences in the three realms. Those endless places have always been covered by a mysterious veil of darkness. I once heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai say that although the netherworld is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld, even Bai Qi himself did not dare to uncover the mysteries of those endless places. That's why Immortal Emperor Jin Tai has never set foot in the netherworld for fear of attracting unnecessary trouble." Bai Changchun's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a strong fighting spirit in them. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but interrupt curiously. "More powerful than the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld? Isn't that a god? Is there a god in that place?" "I don't know. I only heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai mention it casually. He seemed to be afraid of it, so he didn't elaborate." Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and looked at Bai Changchun. "Brother Bai, if you must go to the netherworld, it's best not to set foot in that endless place. Consider this my advice." Yu Qianzhou secretly cursed. The more advice you give, the more excited the old man will be. He turned to look at Bai Changchun and saw that Bai Changchun and Immortal Lord Crocodile were looking into the distance. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but look as well. More than a dozen streams of light flew over and turned into a dozen people with different appearances. They stood in the air and stared unkindly at the three people on the mountain peak. One of them pointed at Bai Changchun and said to the leading golden-robed man, "That's him." Before he could finish, he stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile with his mouth agape as if he had seen something unbelievable. Everyone else was the same, their eyes filled with shock. The golden-robed leader's face stiffened. He looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile in shock. You are Immortal Lord Crocodile?" Immortal Crocodile stared at him and sneered. "Jin Miao, long time no see. What business do you have here? Could it be that you know that I have reappeared and are here to visit me? How is that possible?" The golden-robed man was shocked. Weren't you killed by the myriad swords demon monarch?" The Lord Jin King Lord said. "Do you wish for me to die?" Immortal Lord Crocodile narrowed his eyes. The aura of an immortal monarch that looked down on the entire world had appeared again. "I wouldn't dare." "Huh?" The golden-robed man suddenly paused and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile suspiciously. "Immortal Lord, your cultivation?" The dozen people looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, they could easily identify anyone's unique aura. It was hard to hide from them. They could confirm Immortal Lord Crocodile's identity, but his cultivation was unbelievable. Immortal Lord Crocodile, one of the 12 great immortal lords, should have been a mid-stage immortal emperor. However, they could see through his cultivation. It was only a late-stage exalted immortal. It was unbelievable. "It's all thanks to the Lord Crocodile," Immortal Lord Crocodile said through gritted teeth. His words immediately gave everyone an idea of what was going on. They looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. The golden-robed man looked to his left and right, and the dozen people flew into the air and bowed. "Greetings, Immortal Lord Crocodile. Rise." Immortal Lord Crocodile showed his majestic aura and raised his hand, indicating for them to rise. Then he asked, "Jin Miao, what are you doing here?" "Recently, someone broke into the Great Lord's mansion and killed our cultivators. I'm here to capture this person on the orders of the immortal lords of the eastern and western palaces." After Jin Miao finished speaking, she glanced at Bai Changchun with a hint of doubt. She looked at the person beside her and asked, "Didn't you say that person was an early great immortal?" He said this because he could tell from his early-stage immortal emperor cultivation that Bai Changchun was a late-stage great immortal, which did not match the early-stage great immortal that he had received earlier. He wondered if he had recognized the wrong person. The person beside him also felt strange. At the scene of the incident, he could tell that Bai Changchun's cultivation was the same as his. Why couldn't he see through it now? He explained suspiciously, "I'm sure this person is the one who caused trouble. As for his cultivation, maybe he has some way to hide it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill the Great Lord and the others." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun nervously, but Bai Changchun just stood there with his hands behind his back, his eyes slightly closed, unperturbed. Jin Miao was sizing Bai Changchun up when Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly asked, "Jin Miao, what are you talking about? Who are the two palace immortal lords?" He was more concerned about this. He also wanted to know which immortal lords were still alive. Jin Miao was startled, then smiled and cupped his hands. East Palace Immortal Lord Yi Shao and West Palace Immortal Lord Ji Wu. Yi Shao and Ji Wu. I didn't expect them to be alive. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Jin Miao, go back and report that I'll go find them in a few days. I'll definitely help you pass the message. But Jin Miao stared at Bai Changchun and sneered. Immortal Lord, please wait for a moment. Let me capture this person first. Otherwise, I won't be able to report back empty-handed. Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand. You don't have to worry about this. When I see Yi Shao and Ji Wu, I'll explain to them. You can go back first. Jin Miao's eyes flashed. Immortal Lord Crocodile, that's not appropriate. Immortal Lord Crocodile glared at Jin Miao and shouted, Jin Miao, how dare you talk to me like this? His aura surged. He was indeed angry. That surging aura almost suffocated Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly, a righteous aura appeared in front of him, counteracting the pressure he had to bear. Bai Changchun had lent him a helping hand. Jin Miao raised his eyebrows. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and narrowed his eyes. Immortal Lord Crocodile, do you really think you're qualified to be one of the 12 great immortal lords with your current cultivation? One must know one's own limits. Don't be shameless. I'm being polite to you because the Immortal Emperor conferred you the title of Immortal Lord. Do you really think you're something now? You want to see 2 immortal lords? Believe it or not, even if I kill you right now, no one will say a word about it. I'm definitely going to take you away. You'd better know what's good for you. Don't make things difficult for yourself. The dozen people around him burst into laughter. They were laughing at Immortal Lord Crocodile for overestimating himself. How dare you? Immortal Lord Crocodile roared. His weakness was poked, and he immediately flew into a rage. He spread his arms, and a majestic aura spread out. He was about to make a move. However, someone beside him said lightly, Immortal Lord, step back for now. Bai Changchun stepped forward and stared at Jin Miao and the others. I hope you have the ability to take me away. Don't let me down. Everyone instantly felt an indescribable aura suddenly erupt from the thin body. The entire mountain peak gave off a feeling of majesty that instantly melded with the heavens and earth. Suddenly, the green-robed body seemed so tall and big. Under that thin face, his lips moved slightly, and a sonorous Sanskrit chant resounded through the sky. There is righteousness in heaven and earth. A majestic pressure suddenly descended from the sky and gushed out from the ground, surging between heaven and earth. It could not be seen or touched, but it felt so clear and intimidating. These immortals with high cultivation looked around in horror. The willfulness that they usually had when they soared between heaven and earth had suddenly disappeared. At this moment, in the face of the power of heaven and earth, they suddenly felt so small. Jin Miao's pupils shrank. She looked at Bai Changchun in disbelief and shouted, Kill him. Righteousness, condense. As soon as she finished speaking, the majestic aura in the surroundings instantly condensed and pressed down like thousands of towering mountains. The huge pressure made the eyes of the dozen people who were extracting immortal treasures bulge. Among them, 2 of the weaker ones exploded into 2 clouds of blood mist on the spot. They finally understood that once the power of heaven and earth was unleashed, it was not something that could be resisted by humans. The rest of the people who were extracting immortal treasures had become slow motion. They were suffering from the huge pressure of resisting the power of heaven and earth. Bai Changchun stared at them indifferently, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Yu Qianqiu stood beside Bai Changchun. Although they could feel the terrifying power of heaven and earth, they did not feel any pressure. But from the actions of the people floating in the air opposite them, they could see that this inexplicable power was indescribably strong, because 2 immortals could not resist it and died on the spot. Yu Qianqiu's mouth turned into a circle, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not know how to express his admiration for the old man. In short, he still worshipped the old man as always. Damn! Immortal Lord Crocodile's lips were tightly shut, and the muscles on his cheeks kept twitching. He stared at the back of the thin figure in front of him in a green robe. At this moment, Bai Changchun stretched out his right hand from behind his back. He raised his palm and slowly lifted it up. Under the heavy pressure, a steady stream of air squeezed in from all directions and gathered in his palm. A dazzling light burst out, and the ball of light grew bigger and more dazzling. Suddenly, the withered palm moved, shuttling through the ball of light, changing into an unfathomable trajectory. Finger shadows intertwined, and countless sharp white lights burst out from the fingertips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of streams of light flew toward the dozen people floating in the air opposite them like a storm. The scene of cornucopia green eyebrows being struck down flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He said in a daze, "Immortal lost finger." Chapter 740. Immortal Lord Crocodile's ears twitched. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and memorized the name, Lost Immortal Finger. Thousands of beams of light closed in. One could feel the powerful penetrating power of each beam. At the critical moment of life and death, Jin Miao had no choice but to risk his life. With a loud "hi," he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. Taking advantage of the slight relaxation of the huge pressure, a golden light suddenly flashed out from the bracelet on his wrist, and a large golden umbrella opened up. Bang bang, the flowing light bombarded the golden umbrella, causing continuous explosions. The golden umbrella emitted a pale golden light. The umbrella's rim shone and enveloped Jin Miao, removing the huge pressure around him. The golden umbrella slowly rose and floated above Jin Miao's head. Jin Miao, who had a mouth full of blood, heaved a sigh of relief. He moved around with the golden umbrella, but the pressure outside was still too great. He could not escape, so he gave up. His sinister face was like an owl as he stared at Bai Changchun. Although he had managed to escape this calamity, the dozen or so people around him were not spared. All of them were turned into sieves by the sharp lights. Once injured, they immediately lost the ability to resist the pressure and exploded into a dozen clouds of blood mist. Because of the huge pressure, they did not even have the chance to scream. Just like that, they died. Golden umbrella. Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Yu Qianqiu immediately asked, "What treasure?" Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at Jin Miao and explained, he was one of the 24 protectors of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's throne room. Every protector was given an immortal treasure by Grand Master Jin, and the one in his hand was a top-grade defensive immortal treasure. With his cultivation, without the help of a powerful treasure, even Jin Tai himself would not be able to break it. Jin Miao's gaze turned to Immortal Lord Crocodile and he sneered. "That's a very clear explanation. The Immortal Emperor favored you. I didn't expect you to become a traitor." Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at Bai Changchun, who had stopped attacking. "Don't you want to kill me too? I want to see how you leave here today." Haha. Jin Miao looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. "I admit that this old man's methods are extraordinary, but he's dreaming if he wants to break through my golden light umbrella's defense. I will hide in the golden umbrella and not come out. Let's see what you can do to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Although he was unhappy, he knew that he was right. The golden light umbrella's defense was indeed very strong, and it was indeed very difficult to break through. Even if I can trap him here forever, it's not a solution. I turned to look at Bai Changchun, hoping that he would have some ideas. Bai Changchun slowly closed his eyes. Little did he know that he was also stumped. From the fact that his attack had been neutralized, he could tell that it would be very difficult for him to break through the power of this umbrella with his current cultivation, unless he had the help of some treasure. As the saying goes, someone sends you a pillow when you're dozing off. Yu Qianqiu looked at the arrogant guy who was laughing wildly. He wanted to rush up and kick him, but he couldn't do anything with his own abilities. Just as he was angry, he suddenly froze. He foolishly took out the dark golden sword that had suppressed Immortal Lord Crocodile for more than 100,000 years. He looked at Bai Changchun, then at Immortal Lord Crocodile, and said, "Can this thing break through his defense?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's gaze fell on the divine sword, and he suddenly clapped excitedly. He pointed at Jin Miao and laughed loudly. "Jin Miao, consider yourself unlucky to have encountered such a good thing. You're dead today." Bai Changchun couldn't help but open his eyes to look at the thing in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Jin Miao was slightly stunned. He stared suspiciously at the sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Suddenly, his eyes widened, and he said in shock, "Myriad Swords Demon Lord, this is one of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord swords. Why is it here?" His eyes were filled with disbelief. Any cultivator who was trapped in the heaven and earth universe formation would recognize this thing. Not only did they recognize it, but it was deeply engraved in their hearts. It could be said that he had been terrified by this thing in the past. It would be strange if they didn't recognize it. "It's useful?" Yu Qianqiu shook the thing in his hand and asked suspiciously, "It can break his golden umbrella?" Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. "It's very useful. This is a divine artifact, and not an ordinary one at that. It's indestructible. I don't know how many celestial treasures have been turned into scrap metal in the past. Breaking his golden umbrella is like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Damn it, why didn't you say so earlier?" Yu Qianqiu pointed the sword in his hand at Jin Miao and said, "Be ****, who asked you to be so arrogant? Watch how I kill you." He took a step forward and realized that it was difficult to move forward. The pressure in front of him was too great, and he couldn't overcome it at all. "Yu Qianqiu, make the sword bigger. Lend it to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. He rolled up his sleeves energetically and said, "How dare he look down on me? Let me deal with him personally." "No problem." Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly. Sometimes, he liked to help the wicked do bad things. Immortal Lord Crocodile cooperated with him and shouted, "Bigger, bigger." At the blink of an eye, a slightly deformed giant sword appeared. The hilt was still small, and in Yu Qianqiu's hand, the blade was more than 10 meters long. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and asked, "Is this enough?" Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded repeatedly and said, "Almost." As he said this, he grabbed the divine sword. When it landed in his hand, it felt heavy. It was simply too heavy, a full 108,000 kilograms. He had no choice. He couldn't control it, so he could only use brute force. Fortunately, with his cultivation level, he could still hold it. "Brother Bai, please loosen the path for me. Let me deal with that despicable person with my own hands." Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled at Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun looked at the two of them shouting, "Big, big, big." His expression was a little. He nodded slightly in agreement. Once the pressure in front of him lessened, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately flew over with the giant sword, landing in front of the golden umbrella and laughing lewdly. Looking at the giant sword, Jin Miao was a little stunned. He immediately said in horror, "Immortal Lord, I was too presumptuous just now. We can talk things out. Wait, if you push me too far, I will self-destruct and die with you." "A despicable person like you? You don't have the guts to self-destruct even if I asked you to. Are you willing to be destroyed forever?" As Immortal Lord Crocodile spoke, the giant sword in his hand swept horizontally. With a whoosh, it directly cut through the golden light curtain that sprinkled down from the umbrella. As expected of a divine sword, its indestructible sharpness went without saying. It sliced through the golden light curtain like a knife cutting through tofu. The giant sword was too big, and there was almost no space for Jean Meow to dodge. Jean Meow, who was under the umbrella, exclaimed, "Immortal Lord, spare me." Ah! There was a scream, and blood spurted out. The person under the umbrella was cut in half. The golden umbrella, which had lost its magic power to support it, was put away. A huge pressure surged, and immediately the two halves of the body exploded into two clouds of blood mist. At this moment, the huge pressure disappeared instantly, and the thick pressure also dissipated between heaven and earth. Everything returned to normal. Immortal Lord Crocodile grabbed the golden umbrella, wiped away the remaining divine sense inside, and threw it to Yu Qianqiu. "Take this. Your cultivation level is low, so I'll give you a good life-saving item." Yu Qianqiu caught the closed golden umbrella and winked at it. He turned around and hugged it, fondling it as if he was hugging a sexy and enchanting beauty. "What a shame. I've never seen this before. Put away your divine sword." Immortal Lord Crocodile returned the sword to Yu Qianqiu, who quickly shrunk it. He held the sword in one hand and the umbrella in the other. He looked at both sides and nodded with satisfaction. One was an indestructible divine sword, and the other was a golden umbrella with amazing defense. It was a perfect match. Good stuff. Bai Changchun frowned slightly and stood still, as if he had gained some enlightenment from the battle just now. Immortal Lord Crocodile walked over and sighed. Brother Bai's methods have really opened my eyes. The power of heaven and earth comes and goes at your beck and call. I wonder what this technique is. Do you have a name for me to admire? Bai Changchun glanced at him and said calmly, "Let's call it the immorality technique. I've gained some enlightenment, but it needs to be perfected. There is morality in heaven and earth. Righteousness. Morality technique." Immortal Lord Crocodile took a deep breath and looked into the distance. He shook his head and clicked his tongue. "Not bad, it's a good name." Just the name alone was enough to make one ponder. There is morality in heaven and earth, and morality is everlasting and mighty. The power of heaven and earth. Don't underestimate it, don't underestimate it. Bai Changchun looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the treasure and smiling. He said, "Immortal Lord Crocodile, I would like to ask you some questions." Immortal Lord Crocodile turned to face him. "I've lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and there aren't many people that I truly admire. You, Bai Changchun, are one of them. If you have any questions, ask away. I will tell you everything I know." "You flatter me." Bai Changchun said calmly, "The treasures used by human cultivators are relatively crude. I'm not knowledgeable, and today is the first time I've seen such a strong defensive immortal treasure like the golden umbrella. There must be many similar treasures in the netherworld and immortal world. Do you really need to use a treasure that can restrain it to break it? That's hard to say. Usually, other than using the corresponding treasure to break it, you can only rely on your strong cultivation. If that doesn't work, you can only escape and wait for a chance to sneak an attack," Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he immediately understood Bai Changchun's apprehension. Obviously, it was because of what happened just now. He walked over with the two treasures in his hands and offered them to Immortal Lord Crocodile. "Master, you should take these two treasures with you. With them, you should be able to solve a lot of problems." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He nodded slightly. However, Bai Changchun shook his head. "These are not suitable for me. If I use them too often, I'll become dependent on them. You should use them sparingly. It's best not to use them unless you have no other choice. Using too many of them will only harm your cultivation. You're on your own." With that, he turned into a green stream of light and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he held the two treasures. He didn't expect to be taught a lesson for his good intentions. But as he watched the green stream of light disappear in the sky, he felt suffocated. After this farewell, he didn't know when they would meet again, and he didn't know if they would have the chance to meet again. Chapter 741. Old monster, do you think my master is a match for that two-palace immortal lord? Yu Qianqiu asked, looking in the direction whereby Changchun had disappeared. Based on his current cultivation level, to be honest, it will be difficult. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked up at the sky and said, actually, you don't have to worry. Since the heaven and earth Qingquan array can't trap your master, he should have no problem escaping. At least Yi Xiao and Ji Wu won't be able to chase him out of the array. Forget it, the old man asked for it. Yu Qianqiu muttered. He put away the two treasures in his hands and quickly flew down the mountain. He scuttled into the collapsed forest and searched around. Immortal Lord Crocodile was curious about what he was looking for. When he found a bracelet in the grass, he realized that this guy was looking for the storage bracelets that those people had lost. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu flew back to the top of the mountain with a dozen bracelets in his hands. He used his divine sense to check them one by one. After looking through them, Yu Qianqiu's expression did not look too good. There was nothing in them. Other than some that he did not recognize, there were pitifully few spirit stones left. They were not even as many as the spirit stones in the bracelet of the immortal world's envoy on the immortal ascension platform. Logically speaking, this was impossible. The envoy's level was obviously lower than these people. Old monster, I don't know if I'm blind, but can you help me see if there is anything valuable in these bracelets? Yu Qianqiu stuffed the bracelets into his hands. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned, but he still checked the contents of the dozen or so bracelets and found that there were indeed very few items. Apart from a few decent immortal artifacts, there was really nothing valuable. He thought for a while and understood what was going on. He returned the bracelets to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, of course there is nothing valuable, but the quality of the immortal artifacts inside is not bad. If it was in the immortal world, it would be worth some money. But in the human world, it might not be worth the price it should be. Yu Qianqiu put away the bracelet. He had no intention of selling the immortal equipment in the cultivation world. If these immortal equipment were to be sold to the cultivation world, it would simply be looking for trouble for himself. Frowning, he said, you said that it's inevitable that there's nothing valuable. Why do you say that? The consumption of spirit stones by immortals is far greater than that of mortal cultivators. After being sealed here by the heaven and earth cosmos formation for more than 100,000 years, they must have used up almost all the things that could be consumed. Even if there are spirit stone mines on this continent, I reckon that there will be too many people and not enough meat. Everyone will not be able to eat their fill, Immortal Lord Crocodile said with a smile. I see. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. I wanted to make a fortune from them, but I was happy for nothing. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked casually, why? Are you short of spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu would never tell others that he was rich. Instead, he liked to complain about being poor. He replied subconsciously, I'm poor. I'm poor. Immortal Lord Crocodile paused for a moment, and then said solemnly, I still have some spirit stones with me. If you really need them, I can give you some. Yu Qianqiu, who had asked casually, was stunned. His eyes lit up as he said, you have it? How many do you have? Immortal Lord Crocodile checked his storage bracelet and said nonchalantly, not much, just about 400 million divine-grade spirit stones in total. How much? Yu Qianqiu quickly dug his ears, thinking that he had misheard. He asked expectantly, you said that you have 400 million divine-grade spirit stones? Did you say it wrong, or did I hear it wrong? Are you sure it's 400 million divine-grade spirit stones, not 400 million high-grade spirit stones? Nonsense, my cultivation hasn't fallen to the point where I can't even see clearly. Of course it's 400 million divine-grade spirit stones. Immortal Lord Crocodile said firmly. Yu Qianqiu shuddered at these words, and he walked towards Immortal Lord Crocodile with trembling hands. The expression on his face was as detestable as it could be. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at him and said solemnly, "Brat, what's wrong with you?" Yu Qianzhou hugged Immortal Lord Crocodile's waist, burying his head in Immortal Lord Crocodile's arms as he wailed, "Old monster, from today onwards, you're my master. You're 2F** King Rich." Scram! Immortal Lord Crocodile bellowed. He had never been hugged like this by a man for so long, and goosebumps rose all over his body. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou wouldn't let go no matter what? He shook his head and said, "You're too rich, you're not human. You're a god in my heart. You're my god of wealth. Hugging you is the same feeling as hugging money." Immortal Lord Crocodile was taken aback. This guy was excited because of money. He said solemnly, "If you want spirit stones, just say it. Don't be so disgusting. Say it. How much do you want?" Yu Qianzhou loosened his grip, revealing a pitiful expression as he weakly stretched out a finger. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face darkened. "You really dare to ask? With your current cultivation, do you think you need so many spirit stones?" After saying that, he reached out and pulled the storage pouch from Yu Qianzhou's waist. He casually glanced at it and was immediately taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianzhou suspiciously, wondering why this fellow had an empty storage pouch on him. Where did he put those things just now? He didn't think too much about it, and directly took out a pile of shiny black spirit stones from his bracelet and put them into the storage bag. Then, he threw the storage bag back to Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou's hands trembled as he picked up the storage bag and examined it. It would have been fine if he hadn't taken a look, but when he did, he was shocked. There was a huge pile of shiny black spirit stones in the storage bag. There were actually 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianzhou thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He shook his head and looked at the storage bag again. But the truth was the truth. No matter how he looked at it, there were 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened, and he staggered several steps back as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. He had wanted to ask Immortal Lord Crocodile for 1,000,000 divine-grade spirit stones, but the other party misunderstood and gave him 100 million, 100 times more than what he wanted. Oh my god. A divine-grade spirit stone was worth 100 million high-grade spirit stones. How many high-grade spirit stones was 100 million divine-grade spirit stones worth? Damn it, I can't calculate it. In any case, I'm rich. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Huang Xiaolong's behavior and scolded, "What the hell are you doing?" Yu Qianzhou regained his senses and hurriedly stuffed the storage bag into his robe, sending it back to Utopia. He was afraid that the old man would go back on his word. In any case, now that the storage bag was in his hands, he wouldn't return it even if he was beaten to death. With an astronomical amount of wealth in his hands, Yu Qianzhou felt comfortable all over. He no longer had to worry about being unable to support a woman. Patting his chest, Huang Xiaolong felt more confident. He cleared his throat and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, asking curiously, "How did you get so many divine-grade spirit stones? Were you in charge of the Immortal Emperor's finances? What nonsense are you talking about? How can a mere 400 million divine-grade spirit stones be considered a lot?" If it was in the past, Jean Miao would have been able to take it out. There were many people in the immortal world who could take out 400 million divine-grade spirit stones. These are just the ones I carry around with me. I think it wouldn't be a problem to take out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones from my immortal palace. Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression dimmed as he sighed. "If I had known this would happen, would have brought more with me. Now, I'm afraid they've all become someone else's wedding dress." Yu Qianzhou finally understood. If Immortal Lord Crocodile hadn't been suppressed at the bottom of the lake for so many years without anyone knowing, the spirit stones in his bracelet wouldn't have been left behind until now. However, he was still shocked by the wealth of the celestial world. People at different levels had a different understanding of wealth. Immortal Lord Crocodile's wealth alone was enough to rival the entire cultivation world. The immortal world is indeed the immortal world. There are so many spirit stones. You're wrong. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head. In fact, the place with the most spirit stones isn't the immortal world, but the netherworld. Whether it's the vastness of the land or the reserves of spirit stones, the netherworld has the most spirit stones. To the netherworld cultivators, spirit stones are useless to their cultivation, so very few people mine them. At the same time, the netherworld emperor strictly controls the mining of spirit stones. His main purpose is to prevent large amounts of spirit stones from falling into the hands of the immortal world cultivators to strengthen the immortal world. Of course, there are times when the netherworld uses spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. Secondly, the various feudal vassals in the netherworld secretly mine spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. This is also the main channel through which spirit stones from the netherworld flow to the immortal world. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The netherworld, which originally gave people a sense of horror, now made him yearn for it. He really didn't mind having more money. Instead, he felt that the more money the better, because he firmly believed that money made things easier. However, it was just wishful thinking. With his current ability, going to the netherworld was not a good thing. After coming to his senses, Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, I heard you and Jin Miao say that you want to visit Yi Xiao and Ji Wu. Are you really going to look for them? Immortal Lord Crocodile fell silent. After a long time, he sighed, people are like this. Even Jin Miao doesn't take me seriously. Imagine what Yi Xiao and Ji Wu will do. Maybe Ji Wu's attitude will be better, and Yi Xiao has always been arrogant and condescending. Why should I go and humiliate myself? Sigh. Strength decides everything. You're finally willing to wake up from your dream. Yu Qianqiu despised him in his heart. Then, he comforted him, old monster, don't be discouraged. An old steed has great ambitions. Life will inevitably encounter ups and downs. Whether you're a hero or a coward, the key is to see who has the last laugh. So what if it's Ji Wu? So what if it's Yi Xiao? So what if he's the immortal emperor and the emperor of the netherworld? Don't you still have a lot of time to take things slowly? Now that everyone thinks that you're dead, the immortal emperor won't pay attention to you anymore. Without any hindrances, it's time for you to show your true abilities. If you don't believe me, you can wait another 1,000 years. Anything is possible. Of course, we have to start from scratch, step by step. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes lit up at these words, and his ambition was ignited once again. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, then how do you think we should start from scratch? It's very simple. We'll benefit each other. In short, we'll help each other. Yu Qianqiu coughed and said in a weaker tone, first of all, help me find the purple flame first. Once I cultivate the Samadhi true fire, I'll burn whoever dares to stop us. Chapter 742. That's a good idea, Immortal Lord Crocodile said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu was no fool. He naturally heard the sarcasm in Immortal Lord Crocodile's tone, but he was happy to play dumb and pretend that he did not understand. As the saying went, if one was not thick-skinned, one should not come out. Boss Yu was experienced and knowledgeable, so this bit of provocation was nothing to him. Immortal Lord Crocodile also saw that this guy was thick-skinned and did not want to talk nonsense. He looked around and frowned. Jin Miao and the others died here. It won't be long before Yi Xiao and the others find out. I'm afraid we can no longer stay here and have to find another place. Don't worry. It's very safe here. When Yu Qianqiu said this, he looked into the distance with a hint of worry in his eyes. He was not saying this without reason, because the culprit, Bai Changchun, had gone in the opposite direction. If he met guests from the immortal city on the way, with Bai Changchun's personality, it was inevitable that he would fight. The culprit had already shown himself. Those immortals could not be expected to collect the corpses of Jin Miao and the others. Immortal Lord Crocodile was slightly startled, but he also understood from the worry in his eyes. The two did not say anything more. They flew down the mountain, turned a corner, and appeared in the forest on the other side. When the two walked to the Moon Lake, there were no more cannibals by the lake, and the tents at the foot of the mountain had been cleaned up. While Yu Qianzhou was puzzled, he saw many heads peeking out of the caves on the mountain. They were all frightened by the movement outside and all hid in the caves. Knowing that the two warriors had returned, Garland was the first to run out of the cave, heading straight for Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou was truly speechless towards this passionate woman. He allowed her to directly enter his bad side, and his face was also bitten a few times by her. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at this scene coldly and said, "I was wondering why you kept staying here. Turns out you're having an affair with this woman." Yu Qianzhou immediately took the time to reply, "Then you've wronged me. This is their custom. The women of the tribe like warriors the most. If you have the ability, then put that stinking face of yours away. I guarantee that there will be unexpected consequences." Seeing that the people outside were safe, the clansmen in the cave came out one after another. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at the crowd and found that many women were staring at him. He was speechless. He believed Yu Qianzhou's words. "What happened over there?" Garland asked as he hung around Yu Qianzhou. "I don't know either." Yu Qianzhou denied it immediately. He then pushed Garland's muscular body away and said solemnly, "Clan leader Garland, can I proceed with my test now?" Garland's expression froze, and he immediately remembered what the test was. He waved his hand and said, "You are the strongest warriors here, so you don't need to be tested. You can stay here as long as you like." What a joke. A single person had killed a moonlight crocodile that the entire clan couldn't deal with. Why would he need to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Yu Qianzhou didn't care. He didn't want to trouble himself. He smiled and said, "Clan leader Garland, we are indebted to your clan for taking us in. We don't know how to thank you. Therefore, we have decided to participate in the fence meeting on behalf of your clan." The news that the new torture master of the demon region was Niu Yud had spread throughout the entire cultivation world. In particular, the news that Niu Yud had intimidated more than 100 soul formation cultivators and forced each lord to hand over 200 million superior-grade spirit stones shook the entire cultivation world. This disappearance was too shocking. Normally, the person who was humiliated would not expose his own shortcomings. No one knew who had spread this news. In an instant, Niu Yud's prestige in the cultivation world increased greatly. Bai Changchun, who had already left the cultivation world, was gradually forgotten. At least, the haze that shrouded the entire cultivation world had completely disappeared. As for the title of the number one expert in the cultivation world, it was undoubtedly pushed to Niu Yud by everyone. Most people didn't expect that Niu Yud would actually take over Bai Changchun's position. It seemed that Niu Yud was an immortal from the celestial realm. This made the cultivators in the world sigh. Bai Changchun had left, and now Niu Yud had come. The demon region was still mysterious and powerful. It was the same for generations, and it was still inviolable. At this time, the forces of the various countries finally began to attack the Chinese cultivation world. After the Chinese cultivation world knew that the soul formation cultivators of the various countries didn't dare to trespass after being warned by Niu Yud, they were relieved and united to fight the forces of the various countries. This time, the various sects of China had to fight with their lives on the line. The other party was serious and wanted to snatch his territory. Once they lost, it would be a matter of life and death. Therefore, the old guys who had been cultivating in seclusion came out one after another. In an instant, the Chinese cultivation world erupted with shocking combat power, and the battle situation was extremely tragic. In general, the Chinese cultivation world was still weak, but the gap was not big. After all, the various sects of China still had a strong foundation, except for the lack of soul formation cultivators. The reason why the Chinese cultivation world was able to resist the joint forces of the various countries was because the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce, which was the most powerful and had the most disciples, didn't participate in this battle. Otherwise, the World Commerce Chamber would definitely be a powerful force that could change the balance. Among the various countries, the Di-Rong Kingdom and the Baiwan Kingdom didn't participate in this battle either, which greatly reduced the pressure on the Hua-Xia Empire. Facing such a stalemate was really out of the expectations of the various countries, and it was somewhat embarrassing. More than 300 countries had joined forces, but they still couldn't deal with the Chinese cultivation world. After the various countries discussed, the various lords had no choice but to bring out 80% to 90% of their strength for the sake of their own reputation. With this, the various countries finally invaded the Chinese cultivation world, and the forces of both sides started a life-and-death battle within the Chinese territory. At this critical moment, the supporting Immortal Island could be said to have erupted. Not to mention the various countries, even the Chinese cultivation world was shocked. Originally, the supporting Immortal Island had used more than 30 tribulation-passing realm experts, and everyone thought that was the limit of the supporting Immortal Island. Who knew that at this critical moment, the supporting Immortal Island would suddenly send more than 50 tribulation-passing realm experts to participate in the battle? These people were all people that the various sects thought were long dead, but unexpectedly, they were all alive and well. They were all hidden by the supporting Immortal Island and had broken through to the tribulation-passing realm. In total, the supporting Immortal Island had invested more than 90 tribulation-passing realm experts, and the other tribulation-passing realm disciples were mobilized by the hundreds and thousands. Tens of thousands of disciples of the cultivation pavilion, regardless of their cultivation level, as long as they were at the foundation establishment realm, they would all be bathed in blood. Based on this calculation, without the soul formation experts, the supporting Immortal Island could almost match the strength of the World Commerce Chamber. This kind of strength was really shocking, and people couldn't help but sigh. The so-called number one sect in the world wasn't an undeserved reputation. It was indeed valiant. With this kind of strength, even in the entire cultivation world, the supporting Immortal Island was completely worthy of the title of number one sect in the world. With this kind of strength, the 10,000 demons wouldn't be outdone by the supporting Immortal Island's move. Originally, they had mobilized more than 20 tribulation-passing realm experts, but at this critical moment, more than 30 people that everyone thought were dead actually appeared. Moreover, they were all tribulation-passing realm experts. In total, the 10,000 demons had invested more than 60 tribulation-passing realm experts. In addition to the tens of thousands of disciples from the sect, it was a huge force. It didn't diminish the prestige of the number one sect in the demonic path in the slightest. The actions of the two sects shocked the other sections. These two sects had actually hidden such a strong strength. What exactly were they planning? Even so, with such strong reinforcements appearing on their side, no one cared about anything. This immediately boosted the morale of the other sects, and they began a crazy all-out counterattack. In the end, the allied forces of the various countries suffered heavy losses. It wasn't just heavy losses, it was quite heavy losses. In this crazy counterattack of the Chinese cultivation world, the allied forces of the various countries lost about a third of their strength. Just like that, the balance of power was completely lost. This battle couldn't be fought anymore. In an instant, the various countries' forces were chased out of the Chinese cultivation world. People couldn't help but marvel at the might of the Chinese cultivation world. The situation of the battle dumbfounded the lords of the various countries. Pei Fong was so angry that he scolded, supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons, "These two bastards, they actually dared to play dirty with me. They actually hid so many tribulation-passing realm experts behind them. Don't ever fall into my hands, or else I'll teach you a lesson." However, after scolding them, he had to admit that the Chinese cultivation world was indeed the birthplace of the world's cultivators. When they flew into a rage, it was extraordinary. Then, Pei Fong began to scold the various countries for not putting in enough effort. He scolded them for not being united, which was why they suffered such a great humiliation. After an all-out war, the various countries' forces had no choice but to temporarily cease the war. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world was in high spirits. If it wasn't for the fact that the various countries had soul formation stage experts, they would have wanted to counterattack the other countries. After this battle, the Chinese cultivation world's morale soared. They realized that the various countries' forces were actually not as terrifying as they had imagined. Little did they know that among the nearly 100,000 cultivators from the various countries, most of them were cultivators at the core formation stage and above. There were more than 400 tribulation-passing realm experts. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world only managed to gather about 300 tribulation-passing realm experts with all their might. The supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons accounted for half of them. There were many other cultivators, probably more than 200,000 in total. In fact, in terms of strength, the various countries' forces were not weaker than the Chinese cultivation world. This was because they had more experts, which was an important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. However, the various countries' forces were indeed not united, just as Pei Fong had scolded. It was fine when they first attacked, but once they entered the Chinese territory, they followed the orders of their superiors and focused on searching for the star bead. They were simply worried that it would fall into the hands of others, so they wanted to strike first to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, in order to protect their homeland, the Chinese cultivation world worked together to form a united rope. It should be known that the power of unity was terrifying. Therefore, the various countries' forces gave the Chinese cultivation world a chance to divide and annihilate them. They gradually nibbled away at them until the final battle, when the balance of power changed. In the end, the Chinese cultivation world won. Chapter 743. It was no wonder that Pei Fong was so anxious. Among all the feudal lords, he, Qi Zhoujuan, and Ouyang De were the strongest when they worked together, and he was the most outstanding among the three of them. The ones who gained the most from conquering China's cultivation world were the three of them. Everyone was searching for a bead like finding a needle in a haystack. Naturally, the strongest faction had a higher chance of finding the star bead. However, everyone was not united and had their own selfish motives. Who didn't want the star bead? Even Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyang Da's factions were doing the same thing after invading China's cultivation world. Actually, Pei Fong was most likely referring to Qi Zhoujuan and Ouyang Da when he scolded them for not being united. However, they were allies and it wasn't good for them to fall out, so he could only scold them indirectly. As for the others, he didn't put them in his eyes. So what if he found it? At most, he would just snatch it. After all, his strength was right there. How could everyone not know what Pei Fong was planning? Naturally, they would strike first and gain the upper hand. Speaking of which, when Pei Fong scolded everyone, he should also reflect on himself. Before invading China, the three factions led by him had impatiently divided up Hua Zongming, Pu Taidong, and Yan Ji's territories. He thought that he had taken the majority for granted. His actions had already disappointed everyone. If everyone still didn't do it for themselves, then the three factions would be a good example. As for the star bead that could cause a war between immortals in ancient times, everyone wanted it even more urgently. In the end, the various countries' factions were defeated by China. Although Yu Qianqiu was in the eastern sacred land, he would often sneakily find Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun to get information. After learning that China's cultivation world had defeated the various countries' joint invasion, even he was very surprised. He couldn't help but marvel at the strength of supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons. These two factions were truly sinister. As expected, there were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was very difficult for outsiders to figure out their ins and outs. If it wasn't because they were forced into a corner by the various countries, who would know that these two factions had hidden so many tribulation-passing experts? However, what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was that since supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons had so many tribulation-passing experts, why hadn't there been a spirit-severing expert after so many years? Excluding the possibility of Bai Changchun scaring him away, that shouldn't be the case. Could it be that there was a saying that the people of different places were nurtured by different people? Or could it be that there were some secrets that he didn't know about? Speaking of which, Huaxia was quite unlucky. The cultivation world was at war, and the army was at war. Everything was in chaos. Even Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun had the desire to participate in the battle, but Yu Qianqiu strictly forbade them to only watch and not participate. However, there was one exception. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to interfere in the secular world's war, the Green Gang and the Hong Gang would make a move at all costs. As for him, Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't be polite either. He didn't mind putting aside the matter of the East Holy Land for now. The war in the cultivation world made Yu Qianqiu even more determined. Both sides actually mobilized so many cultivators. There were more than 300,000 cultivators participating in the war. It was comparable to a chaotic battle between armies. He couldn't help but ask, was it necessary for so many cultivators to exist in the human world? If this went on, would the human world still be the world of ordinary people? It must be reduced. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu was even considering whether he should make a fake star orb and throw it to the various countries. He reckoned that it would cause internal strife, right? If he was asked if he wanted the star orb, he would undoubtedly want it. Ever since he first heard about this thing, he had always wanted it. However, the impact of this thing was too great. It caused turmoil in the three realms. Even the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld coveted it. If he said that he wanted it, he would be too stupid. Some things couldn't be said out loud and could only be hidden in his heart. He was determined to help Shi Wenguang conquer the world, yet he could just casually take something and send him away. Even he didn't believe it, no matter how lively the cultivation world was, as long as it didn't provoke him, he temporarily didn't participate and only watched silently from the back. Because he had found a new route to the top, and that was the East Holy Land. He had always believed in walking the path of the top. The lower his cultivation, the more he should walk the path of the top. His experience from his previous life told him that this was the best way to rise quickly. There was a saying in his previous life. If you followed an official for a long time, you would be a low-ranking official, if not a high-ranking one. This saying could also be applied to the cultivation world. If you followed someone with a high cultivation for a long time, even if your current cultivation wasn't great, your future cultivation wouldn't be too bad. In fact, as long as he had the chance, he would always do this. Reality proved that the effect was pretty good. Taking the current immortal crocodile for example, he had only followed him for a few days. Just a few spirit stones from him would be many times better than him fighting for his life in the cultivation world for so many years. The World Chamber of Commerce run by Yin Baikong was considered good at doing business, right? But even after so many years of accumulation, he didn't earn as much as he did in a few days. This was the benefit of walking the path of the top. Not only were there many benefits, but it was also very beneficial to improve one's foresight and experience. He had only been with Immortal Crocodile for a few days, but he was already starting to look down on the fights between the top experts in the cultivation world. Take your time to make a fuss. Once I've made a name for myself in the upper echelons, it'll be a piece of cake for me to deal with you. Spirit Fong Valley. The disciples of the valley and the Wen family searched the entire territory, but they couldn't find Yan Zhuixing and third brother Xian. Lu Yanqing knew that it was useless to continue searching, so she finally gave up. Wen Lanfeng also lost his reason to stay and had no choice but to leave. When the news of Niu Yu taking over as the torture master of the ghostly region reached the two of them, they were really speechless. Especially when they heard that Niu Yu had extorted 200 million top-grade spirit stones from more than 100 soul formation experts. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As expected, this was Yu Qianqiu's style. It was simply incomparable to the arrogant Bai Changchun. To think that this guy could think of something like this. He was too bold to dare to use Niu Yu's name as a prank. They really didn't know what Bai Changchun was thinking. He actually passed the position of torture master to Yu Qianqiu. Could this troublemaker really take on such a heavy responsibility? Looking down from the plateau at the top of Medicine Hut, Spirit Fong Valley had resumed its previous heroic deeds of saving the world. There were endless pedestrians on the mountain road in the distance. Under her beautiful face, which was like the morning glow reflecting the snow, her red lips opened slightly and sighed. She said, I originally thought that after Bai Changchun left, there would only be two people in the entire cultivation world who could take on the position of torture master. One is Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest, and the other is you. I didn't expect that Bai Changchun would let Yu Qianqiu succeed as torture master. Bai Changchun's actions are a little thoughtless. You think too much. How can I be the torture master of Ghost region? Bai Changchun must have his reasons for doing this. Wen Lanfeng smiled faintly. Although he looked calm on the surface, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable. To be honest, although he didn't want to be the torture master of Ghost region, he secretly thought about it based on seniority. If he removed the relationship between Nongzhu and Bai Changchun, it was possible that Bai Changchun would really ask him to take over as torture master. Bai Changchun spared his life twice, and he should send Bai Changchun off to the Eastern Holy Land. However, he had a little trick up his sleeve. He thought that if Bai Changchun came to him to take over the position of Devil Region torture envoy before he left, Lu Yanqing would see him and he would generously reject Bai Changchun. This was what Wen Lanfeng wanted Lu Yanqing to see. In fact, he thought that the possibility of Bai Changchun looking for him was quite high. Because almost all the previous torture masters of Ghost region were the world's #1 experts, and they were at least experts in the late soul formation stage. Nongzhu, who was likely to succeed him, was only in the middle soul formation stage. After Bai Changchun left, he would obviously be the world's #1 expert. In addition, his character and prestige were good in the cultivation world. Who else could be Bai Changchun's first choice but him? Wen Lanfeng didn't think that there was anyone more suitable than him, although he didn't want it. However, to his great surprise, not only did Bai Changchun not look for him, he did not even look for Nongzhu. It was actually Yu Qianqiu, who was only at the crossing calamity stage, who took over as the torturer of the demon Ghost region. If it was Nongzhu who took over, he would feel better. However, it was Yu Qianqiu who had average cultivation and a bad character. He really felt a little uncomfortable. Sometimes, people would always compare their own strengths with others' weaknesses. Through this comparison, they would realize that they were great. The dignified Wen Lanfeng couldn't help but fall into a cliché. This was human nature. Little did he know that Bai Changchun didn't even consider him as the first choice. He would only look for him when there was really no one else available. What he didn't know was that in fact, in the eyes of the two previous torture masters of Ghost region, Nongzhu was stronger than him. What he didn't know was that Nongzhu's cultivation talent was absolutely top-notch in the cultivation world, even higher than his. It was just that Nongzhu was used to being lazy and didn't want to be restrained, so she deliberately suppressed her cultivation. Otherwise, after all these years, who would be the world's #1 expert after Bai Changchun left? If Bai Changchun were to reconsider the candidate for the Ghost region's torture master, he would still choose Yu Qianqiu and not someone else. Ever since he saw Yu Qianqiu in the Eastern Holy Land and saw Immortal Lord Crocodile hanging out with him, Bai Changchun was sure that he had chosen the right person, so he left resolutely. This was because making friends often reflected a person's ability, and it didn't depend entirely on luck. If Wen Lanfeng met Immortal Lord Crocodile and saved him, no one knew what the outcome would be, but the two of them would definitely not be friends. As for Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu, these two cheeky fellows, they would definitely be able to trick Immortal Lord Crocodile into becoming friends with their words. Bai Changchun had already seen this before. Back then, he had fallen for Nongzhu's trick and helped him take the blame for so many years in the Ghost region. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, Bai Changchun had already heard him call Immortal Lord Crocodile an old monster. The two of them were almost in the same boat. If there was any trouble in the Ghost region that couldn't be solved, Yu Qianqiu would definitely ask Immortal Lord Crocodile to help. Chapter 744. Later, news came from Xian Island. After Bai Changchun left, Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were coveted by the lords of various countries. Nongzhu even killed Hua Zongming, Pu Taidong, and Yan Ji in anger. Although the crisis was finally resolved, Wen Lanfeng secretly felt ashamed. He regretted that he did not help Nongzhu at the critical moment because of his selfishness. After all, Nongzhu had saved his life twice at the most critical moment. The two people standing on the platform of the medicine hut each had their own thoughts. Lu Yanqing was now thinking that after the lords of various countries left Xian Island, why did Niu Yud, also known as Yu Qianqiu, appear in Shantian Island. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu was faster than a cultivator of Huashan realm? No matter how she thought about it, it was a little strange. How could Niuyud frighten the lords of various countries? It should be known that this group of people would not release the eagle without seeing the rabbit. It was impossible to frighten them without seeing it with their own eyes. Unfortunately, those who had suffered a loss did not want to mention this matter again. No one knew what had happened at that time. In any case, the group of people obediently took out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, especially Pei Fong, who was forced to take out 300 million. The more Lu Yanqing thought about it, the more curious she became. Now she found that Yu Qianqiu came and went like the wind. She rarely heard about his route. He always appeared here and there suddenly. Wherever he went, he could stir up a big commotion. Or he simply disappeared, completely disappearing in front of everyone. And when he appeared, there was a lot of scolding everywhere in the cultivation world. He was not afraid of being scolded and could not be beaten to death. He ran around everywhere, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. For example, now, when the cultivation world was in a state of chaos, Yu Qianqiu had completely disappeared from the cultivation world. There was no news about him in the entire cultivation world. Could he really behave and pretend to be Niuyud in the demon realm? Lu Yanqing faintly felt that it was somewhat impossible. In fact, Lu Yanqing also understood that although Bai Changchun was a proud and aloof person, he was definitely not a person who would act recklessly. However, what Lu Yanqing could not understand was why Bai Changchun would choose such a reckless person to be his disciple and even let him take over the demon ghost realm. Could there be more to it? Of the two torture envoys of the demon ghost region, one had the highest cultivation base in the world and was arrogant, while the other. Lu Yanqing now felt that Yu Qianqiu was like a riddle, laughing and scolding, showing his true nature. He was also a real villain, but she could not figure him out, as if he was hidden in the fog. Lu Yanqing thinks that she just wants to see what secrets are hidden behind Yu Qianqiu, but she doesn't know that when a woman starts to be curious and concerned about a man, that is the beginning of the disaster. Especially when that man's world was filled with legendary colors. The more one understood, the more dazzling it would be. The two people on the cliff fell into silence. When Lanfeng slightly exhaled and broke the silence, Yanqing, should we go to the demon ghost region to pay a visit to the new torture envoys, Niuyud? This was the only excuse he could find to spend more time with Lu Yanqing. However, Lu Yanqing gently shook her head and said, "The rules of the demon ghost region do not allow trespassing. It's not good to go there rashly. Let's talk about it later." She believed that with the enchantress and Yan Yu here, Yu Qianqiu would not leave them alone and would come. When Lanfeng paused and slightly sighed, "Then take care. I'll go back first. Remember to find me if there's anything. This time, thank you." Lu Yanqing nodded her head and expressed her gratitude. When Lanfeng shook his head with a wry smile, stepped forward and flashed into the sky, in the great snow mountain of Di Rong country, the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain was filled with red fog. It was so thick that the movement inside could not be seen, and the smell of blood was still pungent. Yan Juixing's astonished voice came from inside. "Niuyud took over the demon ghost region?" Outside the secret chamber, Bing Qingzi, who was guarding at the door, said, "Yes, the news is true. But it's really surprising that Bai Changchun would choose him to take over the demon ghost region. I thought it was either Nongzhu or Wen Lanfeng. This Bai Changchun is really powerful. He can even pull the guide of the immortal world to take over his demon ghost region." During this time, Bing Qingzi almost never left the door of the secret chamber to protect Yan Juixing. He did not want Yan Juixing to encounter any danger again. Because Yan Juixing could not be so lucky to escape from death every time. If something really happened to Yan Juixing, it would be an unbearable burden for him. Years of hard work would go down the drain. For safety reasons, he even summoned the snow flood dragon to the door of the secret chamber. 1 man and 1 flood dragon each guarded one side. The security was tight. In the secret chamber filled with red fog, a white figure suddenly shot out. The snow flood dragon's head stretched out and shrank like lightning and bit into its mouth. A bloodless naked girl was directly swallowed into the stomach of the snow flood dragon. Having eaten another delicious meal, the snow flood dragon shook its head in satisfaction. Its bright red eyes stared at the secret chamber, seemingly wanting to continue. Bing Qingzi, who was sitting cross-legged, just casually glanced at it. At first, he was a little uncomfortable about using living people to practice demonic arts, but now he was used to it. Every day, several virgin girls would be sent to the foot of the mountain. It was unknown how many of them had been used up until now. If it was in other countries, it would have already aroused the vigilance of others with the constant disappearance of girls. But with the identity of the state preceptor of D. Rome country, it was a piece of cake for him to settle this. Moreover, D. Rome country was originally Bing Qingzi's territory. Capturing a few poor girls was nothing to him. Yan Juexing, who was hiding in the red fog in the secret chamber, continued Bing Qingzi's words. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's all because of him that I have to hide like this. So what if he is an immortal from the immortal world? When I succeed in my demonic arts, I will definitely let him know the power of my demonic arts. I will make him beg for death." A sharp roar echoed in the passage of the mountain for a long time. The cannibal tribe by the moon lake was singing and dancing. The atmosphere was very warm, for no other reason than to send off the warriors participating in the fence contest. The cannibal tribe was just a small tribe with a few hundred people. For many years, the 3 strongest warriors would be selected to represent the tribe in the contest. Originally, the 3 warriors had already been selected. But because Yu Qianshou's enthusiasm affected Immortal Crocodile, the 2 of them replaced the other 2 warriors. With warriors like the 2 of them participating in the contest, the cannibal tribe was naturally very happy. Based on their bravery in killing the lake monster, they would definitely qualify for the contest. However, the 2 of them were outsiders, and they were only temporarily taken in by the tribe. How could they let the guests replace them? Garland represented the cannibal tribe and repeatedly refused, but Yu Qianshou held an incredibly sincere attitude and continuously tried to convince everyone. In the end, the entire cannibal tribe was moved, and they allowed those 2 fellows to represent the cannibal tribe. Immortal Crocodile didn't know what was going on. After chatting with Yu Qianshou a few times, he actually agreed to accompany him to participate in such a boring thing as the fence contest. After thinking about it, he felt that something was wrong. How could he have agreed so carelessly? But since he had agreed, he couldn't go back on his word. In the end, he decided to let nature take its course. Once they decided to participate, the 2 of them realized that they had to solve a lot of problems to attend the fence contest. First was the problem of Immortal Crocodile's cultivation. To be honest, although Immortal Crocodile's cultivation was very high in the past, it was nothing in the Eastern Holy Land now. It was very easy for other immortals to see through his identity as an immortal cultivator. They were willing to participate in the fence contest as an immortal cultivator, but others definitely wouldn't. So they had to hide it. So Yu Qianshou took out the breath-concealing pill, and gave it to Immortal Crocodile. In the end, Immortal Crocodile thought that the pill was too low grade, or rather, too insignificant, so he took out something better to hide his cultivation. As for Yu Qianshou, he was born with a special ability, so he didn't need to use anything to hide his cultivation. As long as he didn't expose himself, others wouldn't be able to see through him. But there was one big problem that gave both of them a headache. Immortal Crocodile almost went berserk because of this problem, but Yu Qianshou persuaded him to back down. He even said a lot of inspirational things about enduring hardships and waiting for an old horse to return to the stable. It was really hard on him, and even he felt like he was sick of it. There was no other reason than their appearance. Yu Qianshou was easier to deal with, but the key was that Immortal Crocodile's appearance was too eye-catching. He had a burly figure, snow-white hair, and an elegant silver robe that flowed like silver silk. It was very eye-catching. If an immortal cultivator saw him walking out, their first impression would be that he was either an immortal or a monster. It would be strange if they didn't suspect him. So the 2 of them began to change. Garland quickly asked his clansmen to hurry up and make clothes that matched the style of the cannibals. In fact, it was just a few pieces of animal skin. After putting it on, they realized that it was really too revealing. Even Yu Qianqiu was too embarrassed to walk out of the tent, let alone Immortal Crocodile. No matter what, he was one of the 12 great immortal lords in the immortal world. How could he do something that was almost naked? In the end, it was Yu Qianqiu who relied on his eloquence and courage to walk out of the tent first. Immortal Crocodile gritted his teeth and followed him out. As soon as the two of them appeared, they immediately shocked the cannibals. Their fair skin made the eyes of the cannibal women, who had bronze-colored beauty, light up. They wanted nothing more than to swallow the two of them into their stomachs. This problem was exposed in time. Both of them realized that they had to solve the problem of skin color. Otherwise, it would be too weird to walk with the cannibals. So Yu Qianqiu dragged Immortal Crocodile to sunbathe, saying that the skin color would be more realistic and would not be exposed. In the end, after a few days of exposure, the two of them realized that because their physiques were extraordinary, it was unlikely that they would be tanned in a short period of time without a few years of hard work. After much effort, Immortal Crocodile, with his rich experience, finally came up with something that would not be easily seen through. The two of them smeared some ingredients on their bodies and turned their skin bronze. Immortal Crocodile's long silver hair was also smeared with another color of ingredients. The two of them worked for a long time before solving all the problems that needed to be solved. Chapter 745. The sun had just risen, and the cool morning breeze was cool. The ripples on the moon lake were clear and moving, and the water plants by the lake swayed beautifully. Surrounded by hundreds of cannibals, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile walked out of the tent. The two of them were almost half naked, facing everyone's gaze without fear. Anyway, everyone was like this. Birds of a feather flocked together. There was nothing strange about it. However, the two of them stood in stark contrast. Compared to Immortal Crocodile, who was almost 2 meters tall, Yu Qianqiu looked a little weak. Fortunately, he had been practicing the animal show for a long time, so his tight muscles did not make him look weak. Yu Qianqiu, who was wearing beast-skin boots and a leather skirt, walked in front of the majestic horse with large strides. He flipped his braids in an incomparably coquettish manner and directly jumped on the horse. Garland, who was leading the horse for him, looked resentful and reluctantly handed the reins to him. Yu Qianqiu quickly pretended not to see it and turned his head. The 6 of them all got on the horse. The 3 warriors were Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Crocodile, and Boli. The other 3 were to help them. The moment the 6 of them got on their horses, the crowd of clansmen parted to make a path for them. They danced wildly on both sides. More than 20 animal skin drums were arranged in 2 rows. Intense peng-peng sounds rang out as they sent the warriors off. Boli led the way, pulling the reins and galloping away. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind, followed by Immortal Crocodile, and the remaining 3 tribesmen. The 6 of them rushed into the winding path in the distant forest, disappearing from the anticipating eyes of the tribesmen. The winding path in the dense forest was winding, and if one's horsemanship was not good, it was easy to crash into trees or run into bushes. Fortunately, the 6 of them were good horsemanship, and the branches and leaves on both sides quickly flashed past their ears. Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind Boli, suddenly heard Immortal Crocodile's voice behind him. That woman's eyes were very clingy. She took off all her clothes and touched you a few times at night. I can't believe you could resist it. He was naturally referring to Garland. Old monster, you actually peeped on me while I was sleeping? Yu Qianqiu replied angrily. What are you shouting for? Do you think I don't know that you're spying on me? Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It wasn't that he was a peeping Tom, but Immortal Lord Crocodile's actions shocked him. She had thought that he would be reserved, but who would have thought that this old monster would actually have a taste of meat in the cannibal tribe? He seemed to not reject anyone, and every night, he would have sex with several women. How heroic. Yu Qianqiu was curious and could not help but use his spiritual sense to check every night. But then again, with the other party's cultivation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to discover that he was peeping. It was just that he didn't expect the old monster to be so vigilant even when doing things. It was really surprising. The horses galloped through the forest, and the sound of hooves rang out incessantly. However, the two of them were silent. Let's not talk about each other. Neither of us was a good person. But after a while, Immortal Lord Crocodile transmitted his voice again. Yu Qianqiu, if you can't help me recover my cultivation in 500 years, don't blame me for being impolite. Hey! You've said it 100 times. Do I look like a liar to you? Don't mention it in the future. I'm sick of hearing it even if you don't say it. Yu Qianqiu gave a perfunctory reply. In order to get Immortal Lord Crocodile to be his bodyguard, he had spent a lot of effort. In the end, he made up a white lie that he could help him recover his cultivation in 500 years. Only then did he manage to tame Immortal Lord Crocodile. Otherwise, why would Immortal Lord Crocodile accompany him everywhere? He had already calculated that if the two of them were really together for 500 years, even a rock would feel warm. He didn't believe that the old monster would really do anything to him. If Immortal Lord Crocodile was really that heartless, then he had nothing to say. He would leave, and Immortal Lord Crocodile would continue to stay in the Eastern Holy Land. They would pretend that they had never met. If his cultivation was higher than Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. Of course, Yu Qianqiu was just imagining it. He didn't think that his cultivation would surpass Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. In fact, Immortal Lord Crocodile wasn't that gullible. However, the master-disciple pair's methods were really unimaginable and too magical. Although he didn't believe that he could recover his cultivation in 500 years, he still had some hope in his heart. What if he really succeeded? It was better than spending tens of thousands of years to cultivate again, right? Moreover, 500 years was really nothing compared to his long lifespan. It was worth a try. In the end, he more or less felt an indescribable charisma from Yu Qianqiu. He realized that it was quite interesting to be with this guy. Although this guy wasn't a good person, ever since he got to know him, he suddenly realized that having a long life wasn't lonely at all. Occasionally, he had a glimmer of enlightenment. He asked himself, what is the true meaning of cultivation? After spending half a day, the group of 6 finally ran out of the forest. They could see a road in the wilderness in front of them, stretching into the distance like a yellow ribbon. In the distance, there were many houses clustered together, and it seemed to be a small town. Boli pulled the reins and rode on the hillside. The 5 people behind him lined up and looked into the distance. In just a short while, several groups of people had run on the road. They were dressed like their own people. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know which tribe they were from, he guessed that their purpose was similar to that of the cannibals. They were all going to participate in the fence meeting. Judging from the number of people passing by, it seemed that the cannibals were really a small tribe. At least every group that passed by had at least a dozen riders, but they only had 6 people. The sun was high in the sky. Looking at the panting horses, Boli waved his hand and pointed to the small town in the distance. The small town in front is the midpoint to Lust City. When we get there, let the horses recover their strength and continue on their way. That way, we can reach Lust City before dark when the horses are exhausted. What do you think? Facing Boli's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu scratched his braids and smiled. We don't know each other well, so we'll listen to you. Originally, with his and Immortal Crocodile's abilities, there was no need to run slowly to Lust City. They could just fly there, but in order to not expose their cultivation, they had to do this. Boli smiled heartily and nodded. He took the lead and rushed down the hillside. The 6 riders ran on the yellow road towards the small town in the distance. Running on the straight road was obviously much more comfortable than running on the winding path in the forest. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids in the wind. The feeling of the wind blowing through his hair was nice and cool. Seeing that they were outside the town, Yu Qianqiu was about to rush into the town, but he saw Boli slow down and pull the reins to a stop. The others also stopped. Only Yu Qianqiu did not notice that he had run too far, and only stopped in front of the town's gate. The gate made of wood and stone had a bit of an ancient charm, but the workmanship was very rough. There were many people on the streets inside. Looking at their clothes, it was obvious that most of them were people of various tribes, but some were wearing more formal long robes. Yu Qianqiu took a few glances at the streets inside and found that there were not many decent houses. He turned his horse around and saw that Boli and the others had already dismounted and led the horses to a few shady trees by the roadside. They had the intention of sitting on the ground, and only Immortal Crocodile was looking at him with a faint smile. Yu Qianqiu immediately ran over, jumped off the horse, and asked Boli curiously, "The town is in front. Aren't you going in to rest? What are you doing here?" Boli looked at the other three tribesmen awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu immediately became suspicious, and under his repeated questioning, Boli finally told him the truth. In fact, the customs of each tribe were quite fierce, and fights were common. It was difficult to get along well with the other tribes. The cannibals were the smallest tribe in this area, and it was inevitable for them to suffer some losses. To put it bluntly, they were often bullied. This town was called Shizi Town, which meant the westernmost town on the mainland. Originally, there was no town here. This town was built by some of the larger tribes because the nearby tribes envied the life of the people in the city. They began to learn from the people in the city to do business. The mayor was the chief of the largest tribe in the area, the Shizi tribe. Although the cannibals were small, they were a place where warriors came from. Often, there would be people who could participate in the fence contest and win generous rewards. This made the nearby tribes jealous and hateful, because there were many tribes participating in the fence contest, but there were only 100 winners. Therefore, every time the cannibals settled in the town to rest, there would always be people from other tribes who would come to provoke them, taking the opportunity to injure or disable the cannibal warriors, so that they could not participate in the contest. This method seemed very reckless, but it was an effective way to reduce the number of strong competitors. And no matter how brave the cannibal warriors were, they could not resist the large number of people. In the end, they could only compromise and rest here, not daring to enter the town. In fact, although this kind of thing sounded annoying, it was not a big deal between the tribes. Bullying the weak was completely the nature of these almost primitive tribes. But after hearing this, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and despised Boli infinitely. "No wonder your woman was so anxious to sleep with me." After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu also felt that he should not cause trouble here. It was not that he was afraid of the nearby tribes, but he was worried that it would attract the attention of the immortals. So he led the horse and was about to tie it up. Unexpectedly, a gust of wind blew, and a lot of things fell from the swaying branches. Yu Qianqiu felt something crawling on his head. He grabbed it, and a big green furry worm wriggled in his hand. Yu Qianqiu was originally prepared to just bear with it and let it go. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but in the end, this disgusting caterpillar caused his stomach to be filled with rage. Squeak! The caterpillar was pinched so hard that green juice shot out, and it lost its life on the spot. He threw it away and jumped directly on the horse's back. He said to Boli in a deep voice, "Damn it. Kind people get bullied, and hiding under a tree still gets bullied by caterpillars. There is no way to live like this. All of you, get on the horse and go to the town to rest." Regardless of the consequences, he rode all the way to West Town. Boli and the others looked at each other. Immortal Crocodile had already gotten on the horse with a smile, and they had no choice but to follow. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu directly charged into the town on his horse. He madly rushed from the west to the east of the town, completely ignoring the pedestrians on the road. He used his horse's hooves to clear a path, startling the people on the road into cursing. Before the curses had died down, he ran back from the east. Immediately in the middle of the street, he looked at a 2-story wooden building and muttered, "This is the most luxurious one." Chapter 746. The so-called most luxurious was only because it was much bigger than the other houses. Yu Qianqiu had just jumped off his horse when Bodo and the others arrived. Yu Qianqiu pointed inside and said, "We'll rest here." With Immortal Crocodile leading the way, the others also dismounted. Under the gazes of the people on the street, Bodo and the other three vigilantly gripped the knives on their waists. Yu Qianqiu looked at the knives on his waist and said disapprovingly, "What's wrong? Are you afraid that there'll be danger if you rest here?" Bodo lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice, "This shop is owned by the Shizi, we cannibals can't afford to rest here." What he meant was that the Shizi would rip them off in terms of price. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand. "Didn't you bring money? Give me the money pouch." Bodo was startled, but out of respect for this brave warrior who could kill the lake monster, he untied a small cloth pouch from his waist and handed it to him. Yu Qianqiu was about to take it when he heard someone yell, "How dare you scare my people by horse racing in town?" 7 or 8 people quickly rushed over. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to ask what they were up to, the leader of the group suddenly snatched the money pouch from Bodo's hand. Weighing the pouch in his hand, he looked at Yu Qianqiu in disdain. "This pouch of money belongs to us. We'll take it as you scaring our people." Before he could finish, there was a flash of cold light, followed by a streak of blood. Before anyone could see what was going on, they found that the person's hand that was holding the money pouch was gone, leaving only a bare arm. Blood suddenly spurted out from the dark red stump. The knife on Yu Qianqiu's waist had moved to his right hand at some point, and his left hand was holding Bodo's money pouch with a severed hand. His movements were so fast that the person only realized that his hand had been cut off when blood spurted out of his hand. "Ah!" Before he could finish screaming, he saw a cold light flash by, and a large head flew into the air. Yu Qianqiu raised his leg and kicked the man's chest, sending him flying a few meters away. Blood spurted out from the wound on his neck. Yu Qianqiu didn't even bother to look at it. He pulled off the broken hand that was holding onto the money pouch and muttered, "What AF * king problem, asking for a beating." In just a few moments, the people on the street who were prepared to watch the show were all stunned. Boli and the other three were already dumbfounded. The street instantly became very quiet. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face also twitched slightly. He thought to himself, "How ruthless." The other 7 people who had come with the dead person only now realized that their clansman had been killed. Their eyes turned red, and without any warning, they all pulled out their knives and charged at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu raised his head slightly and charged into the crowd with quick steps. A series of punches, kicks, and saber lights danced in the air. 7 heads flew up and 7 corpses fell to the street with blood spurting out from their mouths. Their bodies were still twitching, and only after a long while did they stop moving. Yu Qianqiu shook off the blood on his knife and put it away without a change in expression, as if nothing had happened. To him, killing a few mortals was not something to be happy about. The quiet streets suddenly burst into an uproar, and everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with reverence. Boli and the other 3 looked at Yu Qianqiu with admiration. He was indeed the warrior who killed the lake monster. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't help but want to ask this kid what he had been doing before he started cultivating. The clean and sharp close-range combat just now was very familiar, and had nothing to do with the level of his cultivation. It was normal for people to die in battles between tribes. In addition, there were no legal restrictions, so it was completely up to the winner to decide. The loser could just blame it on his bad luck and take revenge if he had the ability. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly carried the money bag and entered the shop. The people who were standing at the entrance to watch the show quickly retreated. Boli and the other 3 led the horses into the small alley next to the shop. They found the stable and placed the fodder for the horses before returning. When they entered the shop, they saw that Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile had already taken a seat. The table was filled with sumptuous meat dishes. Yu Qianqiu waved them over and let them eat to their heart's content. Boli and the other 3 were still a little worried. After all, things wouldn't be so peaceful outside. After all, Yu Qianqiu had killed the people of the second largest tribe in the area, the Wasi tribe. Yu Qianqiu tasted everything and found that it didn't taste very good. He immediately lost his appetite. Immortal Lord Crocodile obviously didn't like these things either. He casually took a bite and threw it aside. He turned to stare at Yu Qianqiu and transmitted his voice. Kid, you killed to your heart's content. Have you ever thought about the entire cannibal tribe? Why? Are you worried about those old lovers who accompany you every night? Yu Qianqiu said nonchalantly. Don't worry. I have my own plans. While transmitting his voice, he poured all the money in the bag onto the table. There were 2 gold coins and hundreds of silver coins. Neither of them had ever seen the currency used in this continent before. They each picked up a piece and examined it. The printing was quite exquisite. There were portraits on both sides of the coin. One side was a man with a cold face, and the other side was a beautiful woman. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the portraits on both sides of the coin and could not help but snort. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After looking at the coin again, he transmitted his voice. Could it be Yi Xiao and Ji Wu? Who else could it be other than them? Tisk tsk. So Ji Wu is a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He looked back at Boli and asked, how long will this money last us? Boli put down the deer steak in his hand and said embarrassedly, 1 gold coin can be exchanged for 100 silver coins. There are about 300 silver coins here. If we use them sparingly, we should be able to use them until the end of the preliminary round. This is all the money left in the clan. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. It seemed that the cannibals were not very well off. But it did not matter, he had money. With that thought in mind, he reached out and lifted the fur skirt around his waist. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's suspicious gaze, he grabbed a handful of things and placed them on the table. A pile of shiny golden objects appeared on the table. Everyone at the table was dumbfounded. It turned out that what Yu Qianqiu had taken out were shiny gold coins. They seemed to be newly minted coins. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out another 5 or 6 handfuls of coins and put them on the table. Immortal Lord Crocodile reached out and grabbed a few pieces to verify their authenticity. They were all genuine. The engraved heads were exactly the same as the ones he had seen before. They did not look like replicas. Where did you get so many gold coins? Immortal Lord Crocodile asked in surprise. My master gave them to me, Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not doubt this answer. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had casually made these coins using the gold seal, and the purity of these gold coins was quite high. Yu Qianqiu put all the coins on the table and in Immortal Lord Crocodile's hands into a money bag. He threw it to the dumbfounded Boli and smiled. Now you don't have to worry about money. Whatever he wanted to eat, he just let it go. I'm going to find a place to pee. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Immortal Lord Crocodile. I'm going to send the old and young of the cannibals away. I'll be back soon. With that, he left. About 2 hours later, they saw him walk in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They did not know where he had gone to pee for such a long time. They were already full. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked via voice transmission, you sent them all out of the Holy East lands? Seeing Yu Qianqiu nod slightly, he did not say anything else. In fact, Yu Qianqiu had sent all the cannibals to Utopia. It was just that it was not convenient for him to say it. After eating, the bill went smoothly. There was no haggling. He only spent 1 silver coin after ordering so much meat. Even Boli and the others felt it was strange. It seemed a little too cheap. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it. He guessed that the shopkeeper was frightened by his killing move. Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly, as if he knew something. Just as they reached the door of the store, Boli suddenly stopped and said, we don't need to participate in this fence meeting anymore. They all turned around and looked at him, not knowing why he said that. Boli raised the bulging money bag in his hand and said, this much gold is enough for our people to live for many years. More importantly, we just offended the Wasi tribe. They will definitely take revenge on us. We need to go back and protect our people. The other 3 clansmen looked at each other and nodded their heads solemnly. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression, as if saying, who asked you to kill so many people? Who asked you to give them so many gold coins? Who asked you to send the cannibals away? Now you're getting your retribution, aren't you? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect himself to make a fool of himself. His face darkened as he said, "No, we have to participate in the fence meeting." Chapter 747. There were many reasons why Yu Qianqiu had to go to the fence meeting. The mortals here definitely could not see the purple fire, so he had to contact the immortals here to find out. If ordinary immortals did not know, then he had to find a way to find high-level immortals in the immortal cities. If even the high-level immortals in the immortal cities did not know, then the purple fire was very likely hidden underground. It was much more troublesome to find things underground than above ground. He would probably have to find the meditation cultivators who lived here for a long time. And to meditate here, he still had to find the immortals in the immortal world to find out where the entrance to the underground was. In short, to find the purple fire, he could not avoid interacting with the immortals here. The fence meeting was a good place to start. There was another thing that he was thinking about. What would happen if Bai Changchun went to challenge the immortal lords and the netherworld generals? Although he did not seem to care, he was actually very conflicted and anxious to find out more information. However, with his and immortal Lord Crocodile's current cultivation, the Eastern Holy Land was not a place for them to act presumptuously. They could only advance step by step and find out more information. Thus, he had to go to the fence meeting. Seeing that he was unhappy, Boli asked in surprise, "Why must we go to the fence meeting?" He could not understand. Participating in the fence meeting was a very dangerous thing. Unless they had no other choice, which tribe would be willing to take such a risk? Now that they had the conditions to not participate, wasn't that a good thing? You idiot! Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, but his face showed a pained expression. He pointed at Boli and the others and lectured, "No wonder the cannibals have never been strong. It's because our tribesmen flatter men like you who do not know how to be prepared for danger in times of peace. Just because of a bag of gold, you lost your fighting spirit and did not think about improving. Isn't it better to earn more gold for your tribesmen? If you have the ability to earn more gold than your tribesmen can spend in a few lifetimes, then the future generations of cannibal warriors can protect their tribesmen and reproduce without having to bleed and die for the fence meeting. Many generations of warriors. How many tribesmen can you produce? A bunch of cowards, you disappoint me. What **t reason? Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression twitched as he turned his head to the side, not wanting to listen anymore. However, Boli and the others thought the same. They were reprimanded until their faces turned red and they lowered their heads in shame. After a while, Boli raised his head and asked, "What if the Wasi retaliate against our people?" "Don't worry about it." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest confidently and said, "I just went to pee and bumped into a tile. The Wasi said that because they are true warriors, they will defeat us fair and square at the fence, and then they will take revenge on your people. If they lose, they will accept their defeat wholeheartedly and will not pursue this matter any further. They will treat it as if it never happened." Boli and the other three looked at each other. Suddenly, one of them asked in a weak voice, "What if we don't get to fight against the Swaxi? Why are there so many ifs?" Yu Qianqiu roared angrily. He pointed at them and said, "A bunch of cowards, I'm ashamed to be associated with you, and you call yourselves warriors of the cannibal tribe. If you want it back, go back and return the gold coins to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and shook his head. He had seen shameless people, but never so shameless. Just now, he said he was giving them gold coins, and now he wanted them back. Boli clutched the money pouch tightly. Gold coins were the lifeline of the tribesmen. They could be used to buy salt for the entire tribe. It had nothing to do with personal honor or disgrace. How could they just give it back? The four's faces turned a little green, angered by the words cowards. The four looked at each other and nodded heavily. Boli said firmly, "Let's go to the fence." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. These people really changed their minds quickly. He retracted his hand and the gloominess on his face dissipated. He coughed and said, "All right, it's good that you know your mistake. Let's not waste any more time and hurry on. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's infinite disdain, Yu Qianqiu took the lead and walked out. The corpses on the street had been taken away by someone, leaving only a few pools of blood. Many people stared at them. Boli and the other three entered the alley and went to the stable at the back to get the horses. After a while, Yu Qianqiu felt something was wrong. He walked to the alley and looked around, muttering, "Why are they taking so long to get the horses?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "The horses have long been taken away by someone else. Where can they get their own horses?" "What do you mean?" Yu Qianqiu turned back and asked. Then he reacted and quickly walked into the alley. There were more than a dozen horses in the spacious stable, but the 6 they rode were not there. Boli and the other 3 were anxiously looking around the stable. Yu Qianqiu squinted at the entrance of the stable. He slowly tilted his head and asked Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was slowly approaching, "You knew that our horses were taken away. Why didn't you stop them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. "Who do you think I am? A groom? Do I have the obligation to look after your horses? Besides, you didn't tell me in advance." Yu Qianqiu was about to say something, but he swallowed it. There was no need to get into a fight over such a small matter. Otherwise, he would be the one at a disadvantage. As soon as he turned around, he saw Boli running over and saying anxiously, "Our horses are gone." "They were taken away, of course they are gone," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He sneered in his heart. Lust City's expenses were not low, and many tribes would rush to register on the last day to reduce unnecessary expenses. If they missed the registration time, the other tribes would not open the back door again. The person who stole the horses had obviously seen this and wanted to break the cannibals' leg strength so that they would miss the opportunity to compete. Perhaps the other party saw that they were skilled, so they did not do it openly, but secretly. No wonder they paid the bills so cheaply. If this was not trying to hide something, what was it? "Ah!" the 4 screamed. They could roughly guess what was going on. Boli said anxiously, "Then what should we do? Without the horses, we definitely can't get to Lust City in time to register." "Are you stupid? Why do you have to ask me such a simple thing?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed to the horses in the stable. "Others can take away your horses, but can't you take away other people's horses? Can't you use your brain? This is not good." Boli looked around the stable and said nervously, "We didn't see who took our horses. What if it wasn't the owner of these horses?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot and sneered. "You're crazy, that's nonsense. If we saw who it was, would the horses still be taken away? Stop talking nonsense, who cares who it is, 1 horse each, let's hurry." After that, he went straight into the stable, untied the ropes, and pulled out 2 horses. He gave one to Immortal Crocodile and jumped on the horse's back. Boli and the other 3 were not as mentally strong as him. He could even be a thief and act like it was a matter of course. They pulled out 1 horse each and ran towards the street. Before leaving, Immortal Crocodile saw Yu Qianqiu bend his finger and flicked a red light into the stable. It quickly disappeared into the mountain of fodder, and he did not know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. Rushing onto the street, Yu Qianqiu swung his pigtails and opened a path in front of the horse, scaring the pedestrians on the street and causing them to dodge in panic. Just as the sound of horse hooves sounded, several people ran out of the shop and chased after them. "Horse thieves, stop right there." Boli and the other 3 followed behind Yu Qianqiu with a guilty conscience and quickly rushed out of the town. Not long after they rushed out of the town, they suddenly felt the sky change color. It was a little red, and the town behind them screamed, "Fire! Put out the fire! Quick, put out the fire!" Boli and the other 3 looked back and were instantly shocked. What a huge fire! It soared into the sky, and the ferocious fire quickly spread from the center of the town to the whole town. Inside the town, screams and screams could be heard incessantly. A large group of people rushed out of the town like a colony of ants, rolling and crawling as they escaped from the town. It was unknown how many people could not escape and would die in the sea of fire. Boli and the other three felt a lingering fear when they saw this scene. If they had come out a little later, they might not have been able to come out again. Immortal Crocodile retracted his gaze from the raging fire in the small town and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was galloping forward on his horse. Among the 6 of them, he was the only one who didn't turn back to look at the commotion behind him. Immortal Crocodile immediately transmitted his voice. Although they are unruly people, your punishment is a little too much. After all, they are just ignorant mortals. Why implicate so many innocent people? Oh. It seems that you are quite sympathetic. I was afraid that there were too few people who died to move your apathetic heart. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned back, his eyes cold, and transmitted his voice coldly. This fire is for you to see. I just want to tell you that we are mutually beneficial and equal. No one owes anyone anything. Everyone should help each other. What happened before really hurt me. You could have stopped others from taking our horses away, but you turned a blind eye to it as if it had nothing to do with you. Can I understand that you are hindering me? Or are you trying to make fun of me? I don't think something like this should happen between us. You should understand now that those people who did not escape the sea of fire were actually killed by you. If you could have stopped our horses from being stolen, then these people would have lived a good life. I hope that these people's deaths can be a small reminder to you that there should not be any unpleasant things between us. We still have a long way to go. You and I need to take this as a warning. Immortal Crocodile's eyes flashed with a trace of emotion. This kind of reminder would be unforgettable even if he was cold-hearted. However, he snorted coldly. You were the one who killed them, but you want to implicate me. What nonsense. No matter what he said, Yu Qianqiu did not say anything else. He turned back and urged the horse forward. Immortal Crocodile also kept quiet. The 6 of them galloped quickly, and the burning town gradually disappeared behind them, the Rome Kingdom's great snow mountain. Under the bright sun, the snow-capped peaks were white, and the magnificent ice palace reflected a psychedelic color. Yan Juexing, dressed in a black robe, slowly walked out of the ice palace's gate. He walked expressionlessly to the ice cliff and stopped. If he took another step forward, it would be a bottomless abyss. There was mist rising from the ice cliff, gently lingering around his body. The ice and jade sculptures on the cliff were crystal clear. The steep ice layer at the bottom of the cliff, which looked like it was chiseled by knives and axes, showed a magnificent light blue color. Coupled with the mist, it was like a paradise on earth. Although it was under the bright sun, Yan Juexing, who stood in the mist on the ice cliff, gave people a gloomy and terrifying feeling. His cold eyes stared into the distance without moving. Bing Qingzi was in the middle of the gate of the ice palace, with Yan Bugui, Man Hu, and Third Xian on both sides. They were all staring at the motionless black figure in front of the ice cliff. What's wrong with Xing? Yan Bugui asked Bing Qingzi uneasily. He should have been happy to see Yan Juexing come out with all 4 limbs intact. Who knew that Yan Juexing, who came out of the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain, would turn a blind eye to his father? He brushed past him stiffly, forcing the joy on his face to be replaced by uneasiness. Suddenly, Yan Juexing, who was in front of the ice cliff, opened his arms. The mist around his body was quickly shaken off. Ah! He looked up to the sky and roared crazily. His voice was hoarse and deep. It didn't sound like a human's voice at all. It was like the voice of an ancient fierce beast. The tone of the voice changed from the bottom of the abyss, as if a magical beast that had been sleeping for countless years was about to wake up. The roar became more and more brutal and louder. It scared the surrounding snow-capped peaks to the point that avalanches occurred one after another. The rumbling sound reverberated everywhere. Everyone inside the gate of the ice palace felt that the sound could penetrate their bodies and pull their hearts and lungs. Their faces changed dramatically. Except for Bing Qingzi, who could still stand still, the others were all shaky and had a splitting headache. They covered their ears with their hands and tried their best to resist, but they couldn't stop the sound wave from invading. In the end, even Bing Qingzi's face began to turn pale. He suddenly raised his head and found that cracks also appeared in the ice palace. He immediately yelled, "Yan Juexing, control yourself." More than half of the ice cliff, which already had a large area of cracks, collapsed. Yan Juexing, who was standing in front of the cliff, fell into the abyss. The roar continued to come from below and suddenly stopped. The people inside the gate finally heaved a sigh of relief. That sound was too uncomfortable. Not to mention their splitting headache, their internal organs were all messed up, giving them a feeling that death was better than living. Before they could react, Bing Qingzi had already teleported to the sky above the abyss and stared down. Suddenly, Bing Qingzi's pupils shrank and he yelled angrily, "Yan Juexing." Before he could finish his words, a shadow shot out from the bottom of the cliff and collided with Bing Qingzi with a majestic and unparalleled aura. With a loud bang, Bing Qingzi, who quickly pushed out his palms to block the attack, let out a muffled groan and spat out a mouthful of blood. He was sent flying dozens of meters away. The shadow appeared. Yan Juexing, who was wearing a black robe, had disheveled hair and his face couldn't be seen clearly. He was floating above the abyss in a horse stance. His movements were like a bow shooting a huge eagle. His whole body was surrounded by black murderous aura. One of his raised fists was shrouded in black light. Under his disheveled hair, a deep voice came out slowly, "Devil Fist." Chapter 748. It was quiet inside and outside the ice palace. Everyone in the ice palace who had yet to recover from the heart-wrenching roar were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Yan Juexing actually attacked his master, Bing Qingzi. The scariest thing was that he actually injured Bing Qingzi with just one punch. Everyone clearly saw the scene of Bing Qingzi vomiting blood. Bing Qingzi had the cultivation of late divine transformation realm. How many people in the world could injure him? Man Hu and his brothers quickly flew to the sky and anxiously checked on their master's injury. Yan Bugui and Third Exian quickly flew to the side of Yan Juexing, whose hair was disheveled. Yan Bugui looked at Bing Qingzi, who was squinting his eyes, and anxiously scolded Yan Juexing, "Are you crazy? How dare you attack your master?" The black light circulating on Yan Juexing's fist disappeared and the black aura surrounding his body also retracted back into his body. He put down his fist that was raised to the sky and slowly raised his head. His long black hair flowed like silk and gently rested on his shoulders. The hairband that bound his hair was no longer there. Half of his face was covered by his long hair while the other half of his face was staring at Yan Bugui emotionlessly with his cold eyes. Yan Bugui was startled by his son's stare. His heart trembled and he was instantly speechless. "Master, are you okay?" Man Hu and his brothers asked anxiously. Bing Qingzi raised his hand and wiped the corner of his mouth. A smear of bright red was smeared on his palm. He looked down with a complicated expression and slowly shook his head. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Yan Juexing's sudden attack didn't really injure him, but the power of that punch really shocked him. Logically speaking, he should have been able to block Yan Juexing's punch with his cultivation. However, the explosive power contained in Yan Juexing's punch was frighteningly powerful. It gave people the illusion that no matter how high their cultivation was, they would not be able to withstand it. It directly blasted through the defense that he had put up to defend and injured him. The Zhen Yuan in Bing Qingzi's body was still faintly dispersing. It was not that Yan Juexing's cultivation was higher than his. In fact, there was still a long way to go. However, the power in this punch was quite strange and overbearing. The powerful penetrating power and explosive power perfectly combined together. It was very frightening. It could not be judged by the level of cultivation. Yan Juexing raised his head and looked at the sky. With a swoosh, he appeared in front of Bing Qingzi with a teleportation. The lower half of his face was abnormally cold, especially his eyes, which were devoid of any emotion. Man Hu furiously pointed at Yan Juexing and shouted, "Yan Juexing, you ungrateful bastard, you actually dared to attack Master. If it wasn't for Master, how could you be where you are today? If not for Master, you would have lost your life in Spirit Fong Valley." Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped him from continuing. He stared at Yan Zhuixing and asked, "What happened just now?" To be honest, he was not happy that Yan Zhuixing attacked him. It was just that he was more composed than his disciple. A bitter smile appeared on the lower half of his face under his long hair. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Master, senior brothers, please forgive me. I don't know what happened just now. I couldn't control myself and attacked Master recklessly." The master and disciples looked at each other speechlessly. The angry expression on their faces gradually eased. They all suspected that there was something wrong with this demonic art. Bing Qingzi stared at Yan Zhuixing and said with an abnormally heavy expression, "Isn't it a little too fast to break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time? Why do I feel that it's a little abnormal? Did you notice anything unusual?" Man Hu and the others were shocked. They quickly looked at Yan Zhuixing and realized that they could no longer see through his cultivation. The senior and junior brothers looked at each other in shock. It was too unbelievable that he could break through to early spirit severing realm in such a short time. Yan Zhuixing muttered slowly, "It's too fast. I don't know what's going on either. According to the demonic book, it would take at least 10 years to reach my current cultivation. It's impossible to be so fast. However, when I was cultivating, I seemed to feel a magical power in my body. Once I started cultivating demonic arts, that magical power guided me to break through the shackles and solved all the doubts I had when I was cultivating. It made my cultivation advance by leaps and bounds. It's like 1,000 miles in a day. It's so fast that I can't even believe it myself." Not to mention Man Hu and the others, even Bing Qingzi felt as if he had heard a fantasy. He looked at Yan Zhuixing with an indescribable expression. Bing Qingzi sighed slightly and said, "I can't give you any advice on this. You can only rely on yourself to figure it out slowly. If you discover that something is amiss, it is better to stop first and think about it clearly before continuing to cultivate. Do not be impatient for quick results. Logically speaking, I should be happy that your cultivation is progressing at a godly speed, but I keep feeling that something is wrong. It is simply too fast. You should be more careful." Yan Zhuixing bowed slightly as if he was obeying orders. He said, "It's because I found something wrong that I stopped cultivating secretly. I'm going to think carefully about where the problem is. Just now, I rashly attacked Master because of this magical power. I couldn't help it at that moment. Please forgive me, Master. Since you couldn't help it, don't mention it again." Bing Qingzi's eyes flickered. He said, "The power of that punch just now is indeed extraordinary. With your early spirit severing realm cultivation, you can actually break through my defense. It seems that you have mastered that demonic fist that matches spirit severing realm. I'm looking forward to the power of your great demonic fist." "Yes." Yan Zhuixing put on an obedient look. In fact, when he attacked Bing Qingzi just now, it wasn't because he couldn't help it. It was because of the rapid growth of his cultivation. He was overconfident and wanted to find someone to test the power of his demonic fist. When he fell off the ice cliff, he suddenly saw Bing Qingzi appear in the sky. He suddenly had an idea. He couldn't test the power of the demonic fist if his cultivation was too low. Bing Qingzi's cultivation was perfect for him to test. However, he was also worried that the demonic fist would be too overbearing and seriously injure Bing Qingzi as described in the demonic book. After all, he still had to rely on Bing Qingzi's power in the future. He couldn't be reckless. Therefore, he only used 60% of his strength. As a result, Bing Qingzi was still slightly injured. At this moment, he was inexplicably surprised. However, he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he said that he couldn't help it. Bing Qingzi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to Man Hu. "How's the situation in the cultivation world recently?" He asked, "What's the situation in the cultivation world?" Recently, he had been guarding Yan Zhuixing and knew little about the situation in the cultivation world. Therefore, he asked this question. Man Hu immediately bowed and reported, "After the countries joined hands and suffered losses in the cultivation world of Hua Xia, they have temporarily stopped fighting. They are discussing with each other about the next attack. Generally speaking, the cultivation world is still peaceful. However, there are some movements in the secular world. Firstly, the rebel army supported by Yu Qianzhou has already swept 2/3 of the territory. If there are no other accidents, the outcome is already a foregone conclusion. Secondly, the emperor of by one country has passed away. The new crown prince is about to succeed the throne. Apart from these, there are no movements for now. Bing Qingzi nodded slightly without saying anything. Yan Juexing, who had been listening attentively, asked indifferently with killing intent flashing in his eyes, "Eldest senior brother, is there any news about Yu Qianzhou in the cultivation world recently?" Everyone knew the resentment between him and Yu Qianzhou. It could be said that the hatred between them was getting deeper and deeper. It had reached the point where one of them would not stop until one of them died. However, that Yu Qianzhou could be considered to be worthy of admiration. Yan Juexing's devil arts were strange and overbearing, yet he had suffered a loss at Yu Qianzhou's hands time and time again. The last time, Yu Qianzhou had even almost lost his life. Man who took a deep look at him and said after a pause, "Our ice palace has been paying attention to the news of Yu Qianzhou. However, that guy seems to have disappeared. Not to mention the countries, even the cultivation world of Huaxia doesn't have any news about him. We don't know where he has gone." Yu Qianzhou. Yan Juexing slowly raised his broken and regenerated arm. He clenched his fists so hard that cracking sounds could be heard. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'm destined to compete with you in this life. Either you die or I live. You can't hide even if you want to." Then he suddenly turned around and cupped his hands at Bing Qingzi. "I want to go out and find Yu Qianzhou for revenge." Bing Qingzi frowned and said in a low voice, "Don't be reckless. There must be something we don't know about Yu Qianzhou, who can make a name for himself in the cultivation world with the cultivation of crossing calamity stage. Moreover, he is from the demon ghost territory. If something happens to him, the current torture envoy of the demon ghost territory, Niu Yud, will definitely not ignore it. You don't have to take revenge now. When you are successful in your demonic cultivation and no one in the world can stop you, Yu Qianzhou will be at your mercy. If you go out now and encounter an accident, you won't be so lucky every time." The ending was nothing but a warning to him. "I can't save you in time every time. Master, please understand." Yan Juexing bowed deeply and said, "As long as Yu Qianzhou doesn't die, I will feel like I have a fishbone stuck in my throat. What's more, with my current cultivation and the new demonic cultivation, I'm confident that I can escape from anyone even if I encounter an accident. Master, please let me go out of the mountain to avenge this deep hatred." "You." Bing Qingzi knew he couldn't persuade him since he was so resolute, but he couldn't ask him to do it as a normal master and disciple relationship. Alas. He could only let out a long sigh and flashed into the ice palace, as if to say, "Do as you see fit." The other disciples also frowned as they looked at each other. Man who reminded, "Yu Qianzhou comes and goes like a ghost. Even if you leave the mountain, how will you be able to find him in this vast world? If I can't find him, I'll look for him slowly. I don't believe he will hide forever. If it's really impossible, as long as he's alive, I'll have a way to force him out." After Yan Juexing finished his words, he turned into a shadow and disappeared into the distance. The 6 riders galloped in a straight line on the vast lush plain. Green plants were rarely seen in the surroundings. Occasionally, they could see clusters of drought-resistant short thorns. 6 surging trails of yellow dust followed behind the galloping horse hooves. Yu Qianzhou swung his braids around in a flashy manner as he looked around. He clicked his tongue in admiration. Such a flat and vast yellow plain was truly rare. Under the setting sun, the lush plain was filled with a refreshing color. Between the heaven and the earth, there was a warm orange color. The rolling yellow dust could also be seen in the distance. The sound of horse hooves could be heard. Obviously, it was a passerby who had the same goal as them. Along the way, they galloped without any scruples. Soon, a green dot appeared in the distance. As the green dot gradually expanded in their sight, the magnificent city hidden behind the green forest appeared. After passing through the forest, there were farmlands on both sides of the road. There were thriving crops, and there was a small river that was 2 to 3 meters wide. Many people were busy working on it. Warriors from many tribes gathered on this road. They slowed down and came to the ancient lush wall that was more than 10 meters tall. A group of people surrounded the city gate. They were all warriors from various tribes who came to register. After going through the normal procedures, they would be let in by the city guards. As they approached the city gate, Boli and the other 3 tribesmen immediately looked around. Yu Qianqiu knew what they were looking for. They were looking for the tribesmen who lived in the city. They were the warriors who had participated in the fence meet. They had obtained the right to live in the city. Without the help of the tribesmen who lived in the city, it was impossible to register for the competition. The main purpose was to prevent people from disrupting the order in the city. This rule was very cruel. If Yu Qianqiu and the others were brought in by the cannibals who lived in the city, once Yu Qianqiu and the others caused trouble, the entire cannibal tribe would be implicated. It was said that the punishment was very severe. Therefore, under normal circumstances, for the safety of the tribesmen, no tribesman would easily bring outsiders into the city. This also prevented people from sneaking into the city to cause trouble. It was because of this reason that Yu Qianqiu decided to get close to the cannibals. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the patience to waste time with the cannibals. He would have disguised himself as a tribesman and entered the city long ago. Suddenly, someone jumped up and waved at the noisy city gate. Boli! Boli! Yu Qianqiu glanced over and saw a tall man wearing simple and crude clothes squeezing through the crowd. Boli and the other tribesmen shouted in surprise. Guan! They jumped down from their horses and hugged each other, patting each other's shoulders. They seemed very happy. Yu Qianqiu did not want to be outdone. He jumped down from his horse and opened his arms, pretending to hug them passionately. He smiled and patted their shoulders. He also winked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, who was still on his horse. It seemed to be saying, "Don't sit there alone, okay? It will make others suspicious." Immortal Lord Crocodile's face twitched, but he still forced a smile. He jumped down from his horse and pretended to be happy to see his tribesmen, just like Yu Qianqiu. Secretly, he gritted his teeth and sent a voice transmission. "You brat, aren't you tired of doing such things all day long? TSK. Don't be surprised." Yu Qianqiu replied angrily, "If you don't do such things, it will attract the attention of the celestial masters in the city, and they will chase us everywhere. That will be really tiring." His words were crude, but he was right. Immortal Lord Crocodile was tongue-tied and speechless. He finally understood that what this guy said was the truth. It would be better for him to look for less stimulation in the future. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.